Hello, my name is Azucena Castro, and I am a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Buenos Aires. Together with Fernando Milton Rodríguez, I am the panel organizer of this panel entitled Ontologies of Nature, Indigenous Spirituality, and Human-Nonhuman Health in Contemporary Hispanic Culture. And this panel is framed within the stream Disease and Health Humanities. The title of my presentation is Don't Ask Fire More Than You Can Answer, Forest Fires and Biodiversity Loss in Argentinian Culture. 2020 marked a record in Argentina's wildfires, with flames burning for weeks and months in Paraná's wetlands in the northeastern province of Santa Fe, as well as in the forest reserve Lomo del Medio in El Bolsón in southern Argentina, and in the province of Córdoba, in the mountains at the center of the country. Several scientific sources have indicated that the recent wildfires in Argentina originated because of the droughts associated to climate change, but that the fires may have been intentionally caused by humans conspiring to cause deforestation, to make wild reserves profitable for the real estate business or for the agro business. Whether as catalyzed by climate change or caused by land management projects, the 2020 wildfires have caused incommensurable damage to wildlife and to local communities, as well as the loss of water resources and the destruction of autochthonous forests. In 2015, environmental historian and fire scholar Stephen Pine spoke of a pyrocene in the essay entitled The Fire Age, to name our cultures of fire, where an unprecedented combustion age is taking place as we manipulate fire to burn out places and transform the landscape, and where fires are the consequences of our economic, social, and cultural systems. Eduardo Martinez Carretero, a scientist at the Argentine Institute of Research on Arid Zones, who studied forest fires in Argentina, indicated that fire has been used by indigenous groups along Argentina to hunt animals, and later by the colonizers to make place for plantations. That is, fire is an integral feature of our human activity on the planet. However, as both Pine and Martinez Carretero point out, the cultures of fire vary, from fires used to hunt and to open corridors to travel in pre-Columbian times, to intentional fires in plantations caused by indigenous communities as a form of protest against unequal territorial laws, to the modern industrial burning of fossil fuels affecting wildlife and biodiversity, to the anonymous fires that we see today extending over grasslands and jungles, annihilating human and non-human life and causing terrible health problems. From a health humanities viewpoint, smoke from wildfires cause lung diseases and are now believed to have the capacity to spread infectious viruses, fungi, and microbes that could hitchhike on particulate matter in the smoke, as a recent study has revealed. From the viewpoint of cultural anthropology, Adriana Petrina conceptualizes biodiversity loss in the face of wildfires as runaway nature, since the drastic alterations that fires produce to the landscape articulate the experience of seeing something go away in flames, leaving both humans and non-human entities with a sense of unprotection. Post-wildfire photography bears witness to this sense of unprotection and to the health and material damage in contemporary Argentinian pyroscenes. Photographer Marcelo Manera, working for Multimedios El Litoral, a news chain in Rosario, shot impressive images of the wildfire affecting the wetlands of Delta del Paraná. Two of these photographs were taken when the fires in the wetlands were diminishing or after they had been extinguished. The first, the image on the right, shows scorched tree corpses in the ash-like terrain with a bird flying over the transformed landscape that used to be its habitat. The other photo, taken during the work of firefighters and local inhabitants to put down the fire, shows a rodent escaping the fire and looking for protection beside the boot of a local rancher working along with the firefighters to suffocate the flames. Similar pictures showing the precarious situation of living beings in bushfires have circulated the media from around the world, especially from the wildfires that took place in Australia and in Russia in 2020. These images foreground vegetation, birds, and rats along with human bodies, testifying of the devastation surrounding them. After this last photograph became viral in social media, Marcelo Manera commented that this image, the one with the rodent, is a symbol of our epoch, of 2020 traversed by this great problem, meaning wildfires and the harm to nature. Documenting and reflecting on fire, a corpus of visual media, including photography, along with literary texts and street performances, articulate a social critique of the devastating effects of such catastrophic events for human and non-human health. In this presentation, I discuss how Marcelo Manera's photography dialogues with the short story La Isla, The Island, by Roberto Fontana Rosa, the collective poetry book Humedal, Poema Cuatro Manos, Wetland, Four-Hand Poem, and the performance Tu Fuego es Cómplice, Your Fire is an Accomplice, to explore diverse ontologies of fire as a source of body purification and new life, as suffering and disease, and as toxic cloud and death atmosphere. I will concentrate on a cultural corpus composed of photographs, performance, and literature, specifically addressing the fires in Paraná wetlands in Argentina. But there is a growing preoccupation with portraying wildlife and its effects, both in Argentina and in Latin American contemporary culture, due to the fires spreading in 2020, for example, in the Amazon. In this paper, I approach fire as an incandescent gas that causes tissue damage and suffocation, but also as a signifier. I want to make a parallel with the way Unseen considers radiation as a tracer, that is, a way to see relations between different specimens and to foreground anthropogenic transformations. Likewise, in this paper, I consider fire as a tracer, both documenting the damage caused to the environment and to humans and proposing a critical threshold to think about conditions of health, disease, and recovery facing ecological damage. The idea that I want to put forward is that the visual and textual materials that I examine are kinds of fire writing that explore burning places by articulating a double gesture. On the one hand, these propose a social critique of wildfires, and on the other hand, they articulate a sensible approach to the affected bodies through experimental practices that intend to affect the viewers' and readers' perception. And the first fire scene I want to discuss is the short story The Island by Roberto Fontana Rosa, which is from 2013, that is much prior to the wildfires in 2020. While from an ecological viewpoint, the importance of the wetland ecosystem lies in the biodiversity that it shelters, from a profit-oriented perspective, such territories offer a profitable place for cattle and sowing, provided that the diverse native vegetation is turned into monoculture. Such profit-oriented view is one of the causes of intentional fires taking place in the wetlands. Conversely, the fact that the local flora and fauna has been preserved on the islands has also entailed the preservation of bodies of water in the region, making it a rich biodiverse topography and an important freshwater reservoir. The short story The Island by writer and graphic designer from Rosario, Roberto Fontana Rosa, portrays the interlacing of two events with ecological and health consequences: the fires to deforest the place and the search for and mapping of water resources by foreign biotech corporations. Included in his last and posthumous book, Negar Todo y Otros Cuentos, the short story is set in Rosario's islands, where the narrator visits a friend, a medical doctor, who has been living in the United States and who is staying at his plot of land in one of the islands with a group of North American friends, who are apparently also doctors, who are on visit to practice fishing. While on the islands, the series of strange events that begin to take place elaborate on how fires are intentionally induced, pointing to accountability when both the narrator and his friend see a column of smoke coming from one of the islands. And I quote from the short story. These are fires produced by the owners of the fields themselves. I explained, shouting. There is a lot of ranching around here, and these guys burn the grasslands to clear the land. At night, from Rosario, you can see the fires, and sometimes a rain of ashes falls. And is it allowed? Not. A helicopter that constantly flies over here. It must be from the prefecture. I think there are very large fines for those who burn fields. End of the quote. In the short story, these fires caused by ranchers, as it is suggested, is strangely linked to another event taking place in this story, concerned with the emergence of dead animal bodies, such as the dead cow that seems to have been dried out. And they consider, both the narrator and the friend, that drought is responsible for that event. However, later we get to know that the American friends were CIA researchers working on a secret mission related to bioresearch on water in this area. And as the narrator reveals, they came to study the water reserves in this area of Argentina. And I quote from the short story now. You will know that we have some of the most important water reserves in the world in the coast, the Guarani Aquifer. You must have read that the next wars will not be for oil or gas, they will be for the water. End of the quote. So the story portrays intentional wildfires to make place for cultivation, setting this event into a global context, along with biotech research around water shortage and the need to extract and store water from living bodies. Although the second narrative might seem speculative, it resonates with the genre of the jungle novel in Latin America from the 30s and the 40s, where groups of scientists and urban workers from foreign corporations enter Latin American jungles and grasslands to extract and catalog nature to later manipulate it as a valuable commodity in the market. Fontana Rosa's short story evokes and resignifies Latin American jungle literature to address a contemporary environmental paradox. Since while intentional fires annihilate the wetlands' life and dry out the water as a source of life, water shortage as a global health problem will lead to measures to secure water, generating forms of inequality in the access to freshwater reservoirs. Uh, the second fire scene that I want to discuss is revolves around the poetry book Wetlands, 400 Poems, published in 2020. And this is an illustrated collected poem written by at least four people, some of them poets, and some of them have other professions. If the short story by Fontana Rosa puts wildlife in the context of the modern war against nature and the biotechnological efforts to store water, the illustrated poetry book Humedal Poema Cuatro Manos, Wetland 400 Poem proposes a view of fire as an epistemological element that allows us to understand an anthropogenic change. In this book, fire is presented as an epistemological tool to inquire into social and dynamic and economic conditions underlying wildfires. And I quote from the first book in the poem. Do not ask fire more than it can answer. It knows of heat, of cooking, of light signaling life in the darkness. That it knows of, no more. Innocent is from greed and ecocide. That to others should you ask. End of the quote. Characterized as innocent and as a source of life, fire in this fragment is used as a tracer, following here Anxing's idea, allowing us to see relations between fire and ecocide. That is, by pointing to greed, the poem is evoking accountability, where humans are at the center of the fire scene. Furthermore, the poem also addresses the diseased and sick landscape. Um, as we can see in one of the in the following quote that I'm going to read from the poem. This is from the poem entitled Obstinada or Stubborn. It is not fog, it is a smoke. They are not tall skeletons escaped from a nightmare, nor are you stepping on a rare planet of embers. It is the wet lamp. Yes, that's a fox, a bandurria bird, a wild cat. They are all dead. And among the blackened trunks, the stems like barbed wire, also a grim ribbon, half a millimeter of life, stubborn. End of the quote. The descriptions of the burned landscape, animals, trees, and dried water have resonances with Petrina's idea of runaway nature, since we witness the way fire consumes the life out of the living beings, except for the green ribbon or even half of the body of this butterfly in the illustration, including the book, that survive as resilient bodies. In this sense, the poetry collection articulates a poetic and a political response to the wildfires in the lower Paraná Basin. Unlike Fontana Rosa's short story, Through Fire, the poem addresses broader conflicts taking place on the islands, connected with whom is accountable for the ecocide and the lifeless bodies of animals, trees, and bodies, as well and water, as well as the fire refugees that this pyrocene renders. And finally, the third fire scene that I want to discuss is the performance by the group multisectorial Humedales called Tu Fuego es Cómplice from 2020. The activist performance and a street intervention Tu Fuego es Cómplice was organized by the Art Commission Multisectorial Humedales and took place under several days in Rosario in 2020 since the wildfires started and included a body performance and use of street signals and objects, as we can see in the images. As we can read in the street signal, we are breathing smoke and death come to this fight, situated beside the head skeleton of a cow. And as we can see also in the body performance in the picture on the right, featuring several people passing around water and wearing masks. That is also the context of the pandemics, right? So this street performance approaches the wildfires, highlighting health issues caused by the fires, while the bodies inhaling smoke and ashes, which is also evoked in the masks that they are wearing. The performance approaches fire as an accomplice in the suffocation and the material damage that this region experiences, where fire politics are seen as an integral part of land management fantasies that should be regulated. Therefore, this street performance has actively pushed forward the Ley de los Humedales, wetlands law, to acknowledge the agency of the wetland and the life it shelters, and to punish intentional wildfires. So if the Anthropocene might equally be called the Pyrocene, as Pine suggests, and now to conclude, fire emerges as an integral component in anthropogenic activities generated to make place for cattle and plantations, to open corridors, resulting from the combustion of fossil fuel extraction, or as the intentional outcome of a plan to cause deforestation, or even as a consequence of human-induced climate change. Through fire, the cultural instances from Argentina that I have discussed from the Paraná wetlands, namely Marcelo Manera's photography, the short story The Island by Roberta Fontana Rosa, the collective poetry book Wetlands 4-hand poem, and the performance Your Fire is an Accomplice, All of them mobilize ideas about the wetland as a healing source that needs to be preserved from fires and droughts for the survival of several species, including humans, and conversely, as a place in need of healing, since the wildfires have already altered the conditions of life for the human and non-human communities. What can fire tell us about the current conditions of planetary emergency? I think it can tell us a lot as a material element. I mean, the burning gas that causes combustion, but it also as a tracer, as a way to understand the logics of ecocide at work in the region, as well as the source of a retreating nature and the advancement of a death atmosphere that leaves behind burned bodies. I think we should keep interrogating fire. And thank you very much.